All right, so the last video cut right at a good part, which is awesome. My computer had shut down, but it shut down at a good part, so that's awesome. So I had to re-record that part. But I do want to show you in this video an example of the CSS box model and explain the rest of it as well. So I think the last video had a really good basic understanding of the box model, how it works. It was a really good example with the page that we had created previously. In this video, I'm going to show you how it works. Now I'm drawing. Do not judge me. I don't have my tablet set up. I'm drawing with my mouse. So bear with me. All right. So I'm drawing in my note program. This is what I drew earlier in a video that no longer exists. So I'm just going to draw again. So we're going to pretend we have a paragraph element. So I'm going to go and grab my formatting tools. They're somewhere here. Okay, there we go. All right. So we're going to make this, since that was a paragraph element, we're going to make this an H2 element. It's going to be H2. Okay. Close it. So this is H2 element, and this means that everything inside of here is going to be in that H2 element. All right, I'm going to change the color. So I'm going to make a box. A box. Go to make a box. All right, and then I'm going to draw this box out. This is going to represent our H2 element. Okay. Now, in the box model, there are areas that you don't see. Of course, I'm drawing it so you're seeing it, but there are areas that are transparent, which you're not going to see. So areas such as padding, areas such as your margin, you're not going to see those areas. So I'm going to draw some content. I'm going to say that this is what we want to say, hello, just to give me a better challenge of doing cursive with the mouse. Look at that, okay? All right, so this is our text. It is saying hello. Let me change the color. All right, so typically, so that's your text, right? But really, the content area of this text is going to be at the height and the baseline of this. I got to make sure I go out long enough. All right, so this, there, here. Okay, you're going to pretend that it's touching that baseline here and here, right? So typically there is no space really in between them. And even though this space is here, we're just going to say it's because of that. But anyway, there's no space, right? The text pretty much comes to the edge of the edge of the area, and that's that. Okay, so this right here represents, this is your content. So we'll say, we'll do that in a moment. All right, so this is your content. Then this area, which doesn't exist, right? So it's the content butting up against the edge. So the content is the total width of your area, right? Of your box model. Then we have our padding, which is going to be this area right here, right? So the padding is going to be the area that keeps this away from this edge, right? So that's the padding. So all of this is our padding. Okay, so this is padding. Okay. This is our padding. So with padding, we have, remember we talked about treble? So we have that T, R, B, L. Means nothing to you right now, but it will. Okay, so that's our treble. So that's our padding. So if I were to label these, which I will in a second, then that's the padding. And then this that we see is the border. Okay, so this is the border. Change color. I was like, what's happening? Okay, so this is our border. This one I'll go ahead and label now. Okay, so border. And then we have our margin, which you also don't see. So let me find another light color. But it exists. It's the area outside of the border. So we'll say margin. Okay, so we have padding. Let me go back to yellow. Padding. Padding is going to be this area from the content to the border, right? So that's padding from the content to the border, okay? And then this right here doesn't exist. It's an imaginary box. So I'm actually going to delete it. Okay. But this is your content. It looks like a hot mess right now. I get it. But this is the content. This is all the padding that's keeping it away from the edges, right? And the padding we have to, and the padding is also transparent. Okay. Let me label that. Oh, I didn't label it yet. Okay. So this is the padding. Okay. So we have our margin, our padding, our content, our border. Those are the 4 areas that make up the box model. So again, very interesting information about this. So the content is our width. So whenever we define a width, that's what we're saying. Oh, the width of this content is this. Then we have the padding, right? And the padding has a top, right, bottom, left. It's treble. That's why that's the term. Then we have a border, which also has a top. Oh, I forgot to write it in. Sorry. We have a border that also has a top, bottom. So top, right, bottom, left. And then we have a margin that also has what? You guessed it, a top. It's the margin. Right, bottom, left. Okay. So this is our box model. This looks horrible. I know this one looks better. So I'm going to show you that one. All right. So this is our box model. This was for the paragraph. This was for the H2, which is horrible. But remember, this one doesn't exist. So this is the content. This is the padding inside, right? This is the border. And then this is the margin that's outside. So remember, margin and padding you can't physically see, but you can see the results of them, right? So if we go into here and we try it, which we're going to do in a second, you'll see the results. But if you look at the explanation, this is explaining exactly what I said. The content of the box where the text and images appear is the content. The padding clears an area around the content. Padding is transparent. A border goes around the padding and the content. And then a margin clears the area outside of the border. And the margin is also transparent. So the box model allows us to add a border around the elements and to really just define the spacing, which is the margin and the padding. Padding happens inside, margin happens outside. All right. So if we try it ourselves and we look at this example of, bring this over a little bit, zoom in a little bit. And we look at this example that is demonstrating the box model here. We're going to see that the box model, this is what it looks like. It's got this is the content inside, this is the padding, this is the border, and then there's a margin outside. Now, if we were to take away the padding, just so that we can show you, and we run this, you'll see that now the padding goes away and now there's no space around the text and its border. Okay, so the padding is keeping that text away from its border. So that's the job of padding. I'm gonna undo that, run that again. All right. And then so we have our our width, right? So the width is talking about this 300 pixels. That's all the width is talking about is 300 pixels, which is the content. It's not talking about the padding. It's not talking about the margin. It's not talking about the border. It is only talking about the content. So when we define what the width is, we're only defining the width of the content. Keep that in mind. That's going to come important in just a few moments. All right. So if I go back to our W3 schools, then we'll see that there's some important information in here. In order to set the width and height of the element correctly on our browsers, you have to understand how the box model works. Super important to understand how it works, or you're going to have a site that breaks and you're not going to understand why. So, important note over here is denoted in yellow. It says when you set the width and the height properties of an element with CSS, you set the width and the height of the content area only, right? So to calculate the full size of that element, you must also include padding, borders, and margins. So in this example right here, it's showing that the div is 320, padding is 10, border is 5 solid gray, and margin is 20. Well, the actual total width of this, if I were to ask somebody, they might say, typically a student would say, oh, 320 plus 10, that's 330, plus 5, that's going to be 335. But what they're missing is the width. Remember that trouble. So when we're talking width, we're talking left and right. We don't have to worry about the top and bottom. We have to worry about the left and right. And so the left and right is going to be the 10 plus 10 pixels for padding, because that's 2. And then the border is going to be 5 plus 5 pixels for the left and the right. So that's actually 10. So you have to add 30 more pixels to this, and you'll get the total width of 350. Just to show you this a little bit more, let me make this a little smaller so we can see it. All right, so right now we have this div, and the div width is 320, padding is 10, border is 5, right, of this image. So it says the picture above is 350 pixels wide, total width is 350, and that is because you have to add the padding on the left and the right side of 10 pixels, and the border on the left and the right side of 5 pixels, because we're talking width, right? So if we look at this, and just to show you this a little bit in more detail, let's suppose I wrap this whole thing in a wrapper. Okay, so I'm going to go up here under body. We learned last week how to give a div an ID of wrapper. So I'm just going to make a div space ID equals quote, quote, close it, right? And then down here, just to make sure I don't forget, I'm going to close this div. But just so that I know what that div is, I'm also going to comment on that div. So I'm going to get comment wrapper. I know that this is going to be wrapper, comment, quote. And remember, I left these quotes open so that I can go ahead and put in the ID name of wrapper. So I have my div ID equals wrapper. I closed it down here. Typically, if I were to create this, if I was the one who created this as well, because remember I said all divs look the same, there is nothing saying, oh, this div goes with this. So if I had a whole page and I had a whole bunch of divs, I might get confused on which div goes where. So what I would do is comment this out. Okay, just so that I have it. So now I know, oh, this div goes to flower clematis, this div goes to wrapper. Okay, so just for organization, this is just how I like to do it, not how you have to do it, but I just don't want you guys to get confused. So when I'm teaching, I teach you guys how to comment heavy so that you know what's what when you're working. Okay, so now I've just added a wrapper to this. Now, if we run it, you're not gonna see anything really happen except for the border, but and that's it. And that's just because there is a generic tag right here that says, hey, everything that is a div, put a border around it of 5 pixels. So that's why that did that, because that div doesn't have an ID. So that's another reason you use IDs, because if you div classes, if you had them in there, then that means every single one is gonna follow this rule. And maybe you don't want every single one to follow that rule. So that's kind of like, if you want everything that has div to follow that, those are the features that you would put in there. It's just a div. But we know that we got wrapper, so I'm just gonna hit hashtag wrapper. Open that. Okay. And then now I'm going to give it just a background color. Maybe blue. Okay, and then run that just so we can see it. So there's the background color. But now something that we notice that we're seeing is the width, right? So the width of this div is 320 pixels, but the total width is 350 pixels, right? So that's why the image is not inside of here, and neither is this, what is that picture above? Neither is the caption below it. Neither one of those are inside of here, because they're following the rule of the div, right? And then, but it had to account for padding, it had to account for the border. So what I would need to do is to go ahead and give this, but let's just suppose I don't know that. And I'm just saying, oh, well, the total width is 320 pixels. Okay, so if I do that, then it gave me the total width of 320 pixels. If I want it to consider the padding and the border, but right now my website's broken, right? So my web page is broken because it has the wrong width. So now that I know, oh, I need to add the 20 pixels for the left and right side of padding plus the 10 pixels for the left and right side of border to equal 30. So let me add 30 to this. And now I have it at 350. And now it's covering my website, all the content on my website like it should, which is awesome. Okay, so you have to know this, and then there's sometimes you have to subtract. There'll be times when, let's suppose the author told us, or the client said, oh, the space that it's going in is only 320 pixels. So or let's just suppose, yeah, that's what she said, 320 pixels. Well, then we would have to change the size, the width of everything, right? So if I go back to 320 pixels, then it's like, oh, that means now I have to subtract 30 from this, which is going to give me what, 290. And now all of my stuff, ooh, that was a lot. All of my stuff is broken, right? Now the caption is following it, but the image is at 350. So this is when I would have to go into my program like Photoshop and figure out what that calculated to. Right now I'm just going to guesstimate and it's going to skew the image, but now it's fitting in just like I need it to. So but I wouldn't do that here. I would actually go into Photoshop, resize the image to the width of 320 so that it gives me what the proper height is supposed to be in that ratio without skewing it. So, but in any event, this is where we are. This is how we would fix that if we had to subtract. But in this case, we didn't have to subtract. We weren't given that limit. So all we had to do is make sure that our width is correct, and now all is well with our website, and we're happy, and the client's happy because now their image fits in the spot that it's supposed to fit, just like it's supposed to fit. So, so that was that with that. Let's see, and then this calculation. Okay, this is the total calculation. So this is how it came up to it. It was 320 pixels wide. We had to add the left and the right padding, which came up to 20 pixels, and we had to add the left and the right border, which was 5 pixels, but adding them together came up to 10 pixels. That equals 350 pixels. So this, you need to have this formula all the time. This is total element width, which is the width of the element, is width plus, so this is the formula. It's all addition. You only have to subtract if you have to subtract for that area, but it's all addition. So width plus left padding plus right padding plus left border plus right border plus left margin plus right margin equals the total width of your element. And the same for total height. Total height of the element is height plus top padding plus bottom padding plus top border plus bottom border plus top margin plus bottom margin. And that is the formulas that you need to be concerned with. So when you're building your web page, it's kind of like I used the example earlier of a pizza, where you have a pizza, let's say it fits 8 slices. If you try to, and it fits in that box perfectly, but if you try to add an additional slice, then either you got to mess up the pizza, it's just not going to fit perfectly. You got to throw it on top, or you got to, so it breaks pretty much. And you break the whole beautiful pizza box because it's not going to fit, right? You just cannot fit that additional pizza in there properly. And that's the same with your website. If everything doesn't match and you try to add something additional without putting that into consideration of the total width, then it's going to break. So this is why this is important to know. The same that we just did in our example where, we broke it. So if let's just say I totally messed it up, I've broken it, right? It doesn't fit. All of the elements that are supposed to fit inside of this web space do not fit because I don't have the correct calculations in there. So that's pretty much it for the CSS box model. And really for what we need to learn this week, the next thing is a site map so just so that you know, a sitemap pretty much just lets you know how to get around your page. So I'm going to do another video for the sitemap, but I know I was talking about Photoshop in the other videos, and what I realized, I was a week ahead. We're actually not in Photoshop yet. We actually don't touch Photoshop until week 6. However, we covered a lot this week that was supposed to be for next week. Like next week, we have to go over tell you the detail in the color backgrounds and stuff like that, and we will. So I'm probably gonna push Photoshop up a week, so we will probably go into Photoshop next week. So yeah, so just look forward to that. That's awesome. It's usually everybody's favorite part. It's going into Photoshop. So the only other thing, I actually might push sitemap to next week too, because we don't really need it this week. We will start needing it next week. So actually, I'm going to make this the last video that we do for the week. So your assignment this week is just to build a 2-page. Hang on. Let me see. Oh yeah. To build a 2-page, it was supposed to be a responsive website. We didn't go into responsive. We spent a lot of time on CSS. So just a 2-page website using everything that we learned up to this point, making sure semantically sound. That means that all of your code is following semantics. Like, so if it's the HTML, then it was the HTML tag. You extend the functionality with the with the attribute. So that that type of stuff. And then semantics with CSS is making sure you have your proper selectors, your proper declaration blocks, which has the proper declarations, which is the property value pairing, and making sure that you have the colons and the semicolons in your declarations. So, but it's of an upcoming holiday event of your choice. So let's see, we have Halloween's coming up, Thanksgiving's coming up. Just to give you guys ideas, Christmas is coming up. If you don't celebrate Christmas, whatever you celebrate is coming up. New Year's is coming up, or even if it's one that has passed. So whatever your favorite or upcoming holiday is, do your website based off of that. It only has to be 2 pages. You can do more than 2 pages if you would like, but it only has to be 2 pages. So what we were let me see. What we were supposed to go over as well, but it would have just been too much. Was just in case you guys want to know, was layout and responsive. Now, layout, we weren't going to go too deep into it. We kind of already did this last week. And this is where we talked about like the header, the nav. We did this in it's in the videos from last week. So I would just say read this on that. This is just talking about the layout of the web page where you have the header, the nav, the section, article, aside, and footer. This goes in the further definition. The header is obvious, it's the header. The nav is obvious, it's the nav. We've been using that. Section just defines a section of the document. You can use several sections. So your site's going to be semantically set. The article defines the independent article on your site. Aside, it's like a sidebar for your site where you have like your navs or maybe some additional information and stuff like that. The footer is for the footer section of your document. And then any details or any other summaries and stuff like that. So you don't have to worry about the details tag or the summary tag. Your tags are really just these: the header, the nav, section, article, aside, and footer. And like I said, they're in the video that we did last week. So you should be good with that. And then layout, we're not really worried about. This is something you can read on your own and decide if you want to do it on your own. But for a level 1 class, I really should take that off, because for a level 1 class, this is something I will go over with my advanced students. So the HTML layout techniques you can look at. I'm not expecting you to do them, but you can look at. What is important for us, though, is this float, the CSS float, but not as a layout. We'll go into that a little bit. Not a little bit. We'll go into that next week. I don't want to. The float is how you're going to actually get this right here, this aside, to go to the side. So if yours doesn't just continue with our straight websites that we've been doing, you don't have to float your website this week. Next week, we will be doing CSS float. So just be aware of that. And then, yeah, I'm not worried about anything else on this page. The only thing I'm worried about you knowing on this page is the HTML layout elements, because this area I do want your site to have. So just that layout element, because we did last week. So your last week's site should have that as well. Responsive, I'm not worried about, but right yet. We will be going into this next week. It just makes more sense, but it's super easy. And what it is how your website, how you can make sure that your website goes across the computer, to your tablet, to your cell phone, or to whatever device it's on. But we will go over that later, not this week. And then the semantics, you guys pretty much already pretty much know. It just, it defines the website, and that's all of those tabs that we just went over: the site, the article, details. Instead of you having to go to divs, like we used to have to do divs all the time, with semantics now, you pretty much, it takes away the divs. So you're going to have a header, you're going to have a nav, you're going to have a section. Your side would just be inline, just like section, wherever you put it, article and stuff like that. So we didn't go into detail on that. We did in the last week's video. So, but next week I will explain further what these mean and what they're used for. But that's pretty much it. I only went over those so that if you're looking at the syllabus and going through this, you won't be like, hey, we missed that. But otherwise, this is all I want you to know for this week's project, where you're going to do your 2-page. It's going to be, I'm not worried about responsive yet, but it's going to be semantically sound. And it's going to be an advertisement. And now we're looking at design. So you're going to make sure that, it's designed nicely. We're not worried about it being floats or anything like that, but designed nicely. Your colors, taking those into consideration, your images, making sure that they're laid out nicely. You can do background images if you want. and things like that. So that's where we are. That is your work for this week. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's going to be kind of cool. And that's it. So I will see you guys in the Zoom session on Monday. Talk to you guys soon.